Well, last Friday of the season, sum it up for us, Max. How did it go?
Pretty okay. I mean, I was fairly happy with the car. We just need to be probably a little bit faster. I think, still not quick enough, but I think overall we have been for us, I think, in a decent window around here.
Okay, was the ride okay?
That's a constant fight that we have, but that's nothing new.
Okay, but despite that, you think with a decent overnight, the engineers can get it into the window? I know the window is a bit narrow on this car, but you can get there.
Seems like it's a decent gap that we need to close, but from our side, we'll just try to put the best car forward. Let's see how much we can find overnight.
Okay, that's race pace and single lap, or single lap you think you're up there?
No, but single lap and long run needs to be better.
Okay, thanks, Max.
The FIA just opened a secret investigation into Lando Norris McLaren after shocking telemetry data raised red flags in Abu Dhabi. If proven illegal, Norris could lose everything. Max Verstappen's title dream might be back on the table. Did McLaren cross the line, or is Red Bull playing psychological warfare ahead of the final showdown? Subscribe now, because this story is unfolding by the hour, and what happens next could decide the entire Formula One World Championship. The championship fight in Abu Dhabi was already reaching a boiling point then, out of nowhere, the FIA began analyzing telemetry data from Lando Norris McLaren. A late-night technical briefing revealed discrepancies in torque delivery between turns 14 and 1 during FP2. These variations, although subtle, raised enough suspicion for the stewards to quietly begin an internal review. What initially seemed like a routine practice session could now trigger a procedural storm that reshapes the outcome of the entire season. In the paddock, the atmosphere turned icy. No one's talking on record, but several engineers admitted something didn't match expectations. All of this exploded hours after a dramatic sequence of events in free practice 1. Max Verstappen, hunting for every millisecond, aborted what could have been a session-topping lap after sudden oversteer in turn 2. Moments later, he radioed something that sent a chill down the Red Bull garage. I think something might be broken. The tone wasn't panicked, it was calculated, experienced, almost surgical. Verstappen wasn't just reacting to a single error. He was diagnosing a systemic problem. Later in the run, he followed up with a blunt assessment: it's everywhere now. Red Bull kept him on track, collecting data, while the engineers at the pit wall started digging through sensor streams line by line. Norris, for his part, topped FP1 by just 0.008 of a second. But more importantly, he did it with composure and consistency, traits that have defined his rise this season. McLaren has built the MCL39B into a surgical instrument, fast in high-speed turns, compliant over curbs, and now apparently one step ahead in tire degradation. That small edge in FP1 suddenly transformed into a clear advantage in FP2, where Norris extended his lead to over 0.3. But that performance came under fresh scrutiny when his telemetry profile showed torque irregularities under acceleration anomalies, which now form the basis of the FIA's probe. Red Bull has not filed an official protest. That would be premature, and the optics could easily backfire. But internally, the suspicion is real. According to internal sources, Red Bull data engineers were first to notice Norris' acceleration curve looked inconsistent with previous runs. This isn't about breaking rules yet. But when title-deciding fractions are at stake, even the perception of irregularity carries enormous weight. One engineer close to the situation put it plainly: if we had that kind of torque spread in our car, it would light up 3 alarms. The FIA's review team is now working through comparative data from other cars, including telemetry from Verstappen and Piastri, to rule out sensor error. The timing couldn't be worse for McLaren or better for Verstappen. The Dutchman is chasing a historic comeback. After trailing by 104 points midway through the season, he's now just 12 behind Norris. A win on Sunday, combined with Norris finishing 4th or lower, would give Verstappen his 5th consecutive world title. But heading into FP2, it didn't look likely. Verstappen's long-run pace was solid but inferior. On medium tires, he hovered in the high 1-minute 29s, while Norris repeatedly dipped into the low 29s. Tire degradation, not outright speed, appears to be Red Bull's Achilles heel this weekend. Then came the near collision that lit up every group chat in the paddock. 6 minutes into FP2, Norris radioed furiously after Verstappen blocked him exiting turn 1. The Briton had to run wide, avoiding contact by inches. "What is this guy doing?" he shouted. The stewards logged the incident, reviewed radio transcripts, and ultimately blamed miscommunication between Verstappen and his engineer, Gianpiero Lambiase. But the psychological battle had already begun. Two title rivals, two philosophies, one fighting from the front, the other from behind. Every move, every word, every gesture now has strategic weight. And behind closed doors, it is no longer just about tire strategy or corner entry balance. With the FIA now digging into power delivery data from McLaren, the narrative of this Grand Prix has shifted. If the data holds, if a breach is found even unintentional, it could redefine the final chapter of this season. Verstappen's camp remains cautious, focused on setup refinement. But make no mistake, this investigation is real, active, and unfolding as we speak. The next few hours may determine not only who starts on pole, but who finishes the year as world champion. Max Verstappen began his Friday determined to answer one question: could the RB21 match the raw pace of the McLaren on a circuit like Yas Marina? From the first minutes of FP1, it was clear the Dutchman was pushing. On his soft tire qualifying simulation, he lit up all three sectors purple until turn 2 struck. A snap of oversteer forced him to lift, aborting what might have been a session-best lap. Still, his final time of 1 minute, 24 seconds, and 493 thousandths placed him just 8 thousandths of a second behind Norris. That paper-thin margin set the tone. This weekend would not be decided by dominance, but by details. Beneath the surface, however, Red Bull was not comfortable. Verstappen's radio messages in FP1 were not ordinary complaints, they were warnings. "I think something might be broken," he said early into his long run on hard tires. Not long after, he doubled down, "It's everywhere now." Engineers at the pit wall immediately switched to data analysis mode, checking suspension loads, floor oscillation, and rear axle feedback. The car remained on track, but internally, the team knew they had to fix something fast. In a weekend where tenths would decide the title, they were already one step behind. The RB21, though blisteringly fast in Sector 2, showed its fragility once again. Every gain in top speed came with a cost in corner stability. The setup window was narrow, as it has been all season. Abu Dhabi's contrasting demands, tight hairpins followed by long straights and technical hotel corners, exposed every compromise in Red Bull's setup philosophy. Verstappen's car looked fast but nervous. Norris' McLaren, by contrast, looked planted and predictable. It wasn't just about the stopwatch anymore, it was about confidence. And Verstappen did not sound fully confident. By FP2, the challenge escalated. As the track cooled and conditions began to resemble what drivers will face in qualifying and race, Verstappen went out early on softs. He posted a lap of 1 minute, 23 seconds, and 446 thousandths, provisionally fastest at the time. But Lando Norris responded emphatically. With precision and minimal correction on steering inputs, he produced a 1 minute, 23 seconds, and 83 thousandths. The gap over 3/10 was clear. Verstappen stayed in the car longer than usual, running additional laps on the same tires, hunting for time that simply wasn't there. What's more, when long-run simulations began, Verstappen's concern deepened. On medium tires, he opened with a pace around 1 minute, 29 seconds flat. But by the third lap, degradation kicked in. His lap times began to drift into the mid to high 1 minute 29s. Meanwhile, Norris, with similar fuel load and compound, stayed consistently below the 1 minute, 29.3 range. The McLaren's tire management is no longer a surprise, but the extent of Red Bull's drop-off raised internal alarms. Verstappen was driving on the edge, but the data showed a car still falling short in consistency. Crucially, Red Bull did not bring any new aerodynamic or mechanical upgrades to Abu Dhabi. Their last major package was in Monza, and since then, their strategy has been purely about extracting the maximum from existing hardware. That places an even greater burden on setup ride height, rake, differential settings, and damper tuning. And Verstappen himself admitted after FP2 that while the car felt in a decent window, it simply was not fast enough. This wasn't about mistakes. It was about potential. And right now, McLaren appeared to be accessing more of theirs. Perhaps the most symbolic moment of the day came not from a timesheet, but from body language. In the garage, Verstappen's posture was composed, but reserved. Lambiasi's tone over the radio remained calm, but the urgency in overnight data meetings was undeniable. Red Bull faces a multi-dimensional problem, a car that still demands perfection in every parameter, a rival team that seems to have found late-season form, and now an FIA inquiry swirling in the background. If Friday was any indication, Verstappen is not out of the fight, but neither is he fully armed. Red Bull's challenge in Abu Dhabi is not about top speed, it's about control. The RB21 has shown all season that when perfectly dialed in, it's a monster. But the phrase perfectly dialed in is doing a lot of heavy lifting. This car requires laser precision in every parameter: brake migration, ride height, camber, differential preload, and even fuel trimming. Miss one of those by a few millimeters or microseconds, and the balance breaks down. Verstappen's description of the car as a constant fight is not emotional, it's technical truth. The RB21 rewards perfection and punishes even the smallest setup misalignment. Yas Marina's layout amplifies the trait. Sector 2, with its long straight and heavy braking zones, plays to Red Bull's strengths: low drag and rear-end stability under braking. But Sector 3 flips the table. The hotel complex demands smooth weight transfer, lateral grip in mid-speed corners, and impeccable traction. And that's where McLaren has the upper hand. The MCL39B is a more forgiving chassis. It doesn't need every setting to be perfect to generate consistent lap times. Red Bull, by contrast, walks a tightrope with every run. Tire degradation is the silent killer in this scenario. Verstappen's medium tire runs in FP2 started strong, with laps just under 1 minute, 29 seconds. But within 3 laps, he was over the limit: traction losses on corner exit, longer braking distances, and growing steering corrections. McLaren's longer runs, especially with Norris, held stable. That's not just setup. That's thermal efficiency, brake-by-wire mapping, and load distribution working together. Red Bull is not inefficient, they're just riding closer to the edge. When the temperature rises or track evolution shifts, the RB21's performance band narrows sharply. One of the reasons for that sensitivity lies in the suspension design. Red Bull's rear suspension geometry is optimized for traction and squat under acceleration. That gives them explosive launches out of slow corners, but it also means the balance changes significantly as tires wear. As the rear end squats more and tire pressures climb, it affects the aero balance. Verstappen often compensates instinctively, but over a race stint, it leads to uneven tire temperatures and ultimately, performance drop-off. McLaren's more neutral suspension layout avoids those swings, making their degradation curve flatter. Another issue is aerodynamic bouncing. Yes, still. While not as extreme as in Qatar or early 2023, the RB21 continues to show signs of micro-oscillations at high speed, especially with soft tires. Verstappen hasn't complained much, but the data shows instability under DRS activation and high downforce sectors. That's part of why Red Bull opted for a lower rear wing configuration in Abu Dhabi, to avoid triggering that bouncing. But this choice comes at the cost of rear-end grip in Sector 3. Again, we return to the theme of compromise: every gain in one area costs dearly in another. It's also worth noting that McLaren's upgrades have quietly made a difference. While Red Bull stopped development in Monza, McLaren introduced several refinements: floor adjustments, bargeboard tweaks, and improved heat management systems. These didn't create headlines, but in long-run simulations, they've translated into real-world advantages. Verstappen is fighting with the same package he had in Italy. Norris, by contrast, is driving a car that's been subtly optimized race by race. In a final where margins are microscopic, that evolution matters. Perhaps the most worrying technical factor for Red Bull is one they can't control overnight: tire window sensitivity. The RB21 operates best within a very narrow temperature range. If track temp shifts just a few degrees, it affects everything: grip levels, brake balance, ERS deployment thresholds. McLaren's car, again, is more stable in that regard. Verstappen's experience allows him to adapt rapidly, but the laws of physics do not bend for even the most talented driver. If qualifying takes place in cooler than expected conditions, McLaren may have a strategic upper hand before a single wheel turns.